So now that we've discussed God, the other big part of your philosophy or your work is nature, and I would love to chat a bit more on nature. One realization I've come to recently, well, I mean, recently in the past couple of years, is that in many ways, nature itself is a category that we create. This is mostly thanks to Zizek's work, that nature, as we understand it, isn't something that's just there, uh, out there that we just perceive and we understand, but rather it's a category we create. Every epoch, let's say, not cosmic epoch, but let's say every generational epoch kind of
Wonderful.
redefines nature in some sense. And I'm coming to realize through Jacques' work, through certainly your work, that philosophy needs to reinvent nature in some sense. So, on that spirit, let's say, Matt, what is Whitehead's philosophy of organism, and then Schelling's, nature philosophy, but also, and this is a bit of a mouthful, so bear with me. Pertaining more to your work, what is descendental aesthetic ontology, apropos nature?
Hmm. So nature is, an English word, comes from the Latin natura, which itself was a translation of the Greek physis, which is the basis for physical in English as well. And it's definitely become apparent with a lot of the critical historical research of whether Zizek, or I think very influential for me on this question is Bruno Latour's work. This term nature in the modern period, let's say, is very much a construct that has been given definition through its opposition to society or to culture. Um, and so when we refer to nature, usually we mean everything that's not human. And then, of course, we'll follow it up and say, well, yes, humans are natural too, but we're different for XYZ. Um, and so the idea of nature is quite consequential for us when we try to reflect on um, the causes of the ecological crisis and how we might want to address the ecological crisis. Latour doesn't like the term crisis either. He thinks it's too minimalizing, and so maybe ecological catastrophe. Um, so, there are other contemporary thinkers like Timothy Morton who want to have ecology without nature, and we need to stop using the word because it's so misleading in the dualistic connotations that it carries. Similarly, phrases like the environment, it makes it sound like nature is something over there that we might either preserve or conserve or destroy, as it were. And Zizek's sense that I love that documentary where he goes to the trash dump and says like, "This is ecology," right? And we really need, in order to get a sense for how human beings are, not only are we part of nature, but we ourselves are bound up in these metabolic cycles, such that every new forever chemical that we invent in some factory to manufacture whatever new product is going to end up not in the environment but in our own bodies. And I don't know if Zizek is willing to go this far, but I really appreciate Bruno Latour's Gifford lectures, later published as Facing Gaia, in his desire to shift us away from talking about nature or the environment to really taking seriously the idea of Gaia, that we do inhabit a living planet. We don't live on the planet, we live in this biosphere. And Latour, though, is quite critical of those who would want to interpret Gaia as some kind of a goddess, and I fully understand why that can be a little bit uh, new agey or something, where we begin to imagine Gaia as like Mother Earth that cares for her creatures and whatever. And as Zizek is fond of pointing out, the history of life on Earth is a series of catastrophes. And um, the current Anthropocene um, situation, geological epoch that we find ourselves in, where human industry um, is precipitating mass extinction, climate change, et cetera, is on most metrics the sixth mass extinction event. Humans weren't around to cause the prior five. Um, some would argue they're actually more like the oxygen crisis isn't usually about 2 billion years ago when anaerobic bacteria started releasing all this oxygen, which was quite poisonous to the life on the planet at the time. That's sometimes not included in the five mass extinctions. So the point is there have been many mass extinctions before. Asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions have caused the prior ones. Um, and so we don't want to overly emphasize the unique evils of human industrial civilization as though everything was peace and quiet before we got here. um, we don't want to have this naive picture of Mother Nature as a perfectly harmonious system or something, right? Um, and Zizek is very good on this question. I cheer him on when he goes after the deep ecologist or whoever might want to lend support to that tendency to imagine a harmonious nature that humans have disturbed. Nonetheless, we as human beings do need to, reimagine our relationship to nature if we hope to survive much longer. And in my own work, I really do try to go back to that original Greek sense of physis, before this modern dualism separated mind from nature, separated human beings from the natural world. I think the Greeks had this sense of physis as um, a a process, an activity of natality. I mean, you still get it in the Latin term natura. It's a birthing process. It's an activity wherein something is being given expression, and there's a kind of um, a creativity that I think the original Greek term was capturing, and this process of that you see in Aristotle's biology of a developmental telos that unfolds in what we now just call the physical world. And I want to, in my work, recover that sense of nature and the physical as something that is a process of growth and development and not just a collection of particles colliding or meaningless fields vibrating. That there really is reason to take seriously formal and final causality, as Aristotle referred to them. And in my book, you'll have noticed the whole section on vegetal philosophy coming out of Michael Marder's work. And so I make this connection to the plant realm, to plant life as being a site of what ontological edification, as it were, that we can learn from the mode of life given expression by plants about how mind and nature relate. And this also goes back to the etymological roots of physis and the connection to phyto, which still has some resonance in English relating to plants, right? Um, and so, I try to draw these connections and articulate a vegetal ontology. Michael Marder has written several books going through the history of philosophy and showing the various ways that plant life has been underappreciated by philosophers. Aristotle kind of said, "Oh, plants are barely alive." Like Hegel similarly said that they're more like crystals than they are like living animals and proper organisms. And I think Martyr tries to be the advocate for plants, and much of contemporary botany now is discovering the ways in which we can speak meaningfully about plant cognition, plant sentience, plant memory, and so on. That these and modern um, videography and what's the term I'm looking for? We can speed up, we can record and speed up the time lapse photography is what I'm looking for. We can see the ways that, contrary to what has long been assumed, plants are not immobile. They are animate. They move. They breathe. It's just that they move at a rate that's not immediately apparent to our animal senses. And so, yeah, all of this to me is connected to an attempt to reimagine what we mean by nature. I continue to use the term in my book. I capitalize it, and I think the first time I use it, I have this little footnote, just to say that I acknowledge what people like Timothy Morton and Zizek and Latour and others are concerned about with the way that this concept of nature is typically deployed in the modern period, but that I'm trying to restore this deeper meaning that I think is still there in the ancient Greek term physis, and that really captures the animate and living dimension of nature.